A question of identity. Today I just want to have some fun with a few ideas, just play around with them. It's not to be taken too seriously. There is, in Greek literature, a debate about the nature of identity, which is addressed using the story of the ship of Theseus. The idea, as stated by Plutarch, goes like this. The ship wherein Theseus and the youth of Athens returned from Crete had 30 oars and was preserved by the Athenians down even to the time of Demetrius Phalereus. For they took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timber in their places, insomuch that this ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical question of things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other contending that it was not the same. Is it the same ship? After all of its constituent parts have been replaced, is it still the same? If not, at what point in that change process does it cease to be the same? How much of it has to change before it's no longer the same ship? The cells in our bodies regenerate on average every 7 to 10 years. Skin cells are replaced much more quickly and skeletal cells more slowly, maybe 15 years or so. But after 15 years, most of our cells will have been replaced. However, neurons in the cerebral cortex stay with us from birth to death, or they can be lost, but they're never replaced. Note that there are some cells in other parts of the brain that do regenerate. I think it's the hippocampus, for example. So some parts of us remain unchanged. Parts of the eye too, for example. But the vast bulk of my body is not the same today as it was when I was, say, 20 years old. Am I, therefore, still the same person? I certainly seem to think I am. Does my sense of identity reside in these persisting brain cells, or does it lie somewhere else? It's interesting to try out a few thought experiments to see if we can shed some light on this. Let's consider, for instance, what might happen when Scotty beams us up, for Star Trek fans. Or we might consider what happens when, according to some religious traditions, the body is resurrected at the end of time, for fans of some branches of Christianity and Judaism. Note that not all religions hold to the belief that we go to heaven when we die. When Scotty beams up Captain Kirk, is the version that appears on the ship the same as the one that stood seconds ago on the planet's surface? Is it still Kirk? Let's suppose that what happens during this process is that all of Kirk's constituent parts are disassembled down below on the planet and moved directly up to the Enterprise, along with all the information needed to reassemble them. Let's not worry too much about those pesky laws of physics. So you have the same material, assembled in exactly the same configuration. I think most of us would think it's still the same person. If we pour water from one container to another, it's still the same water, right? So it's still the same Kirk. At least I think so. Okay, but what if now we don't transmit the same constituent parts at all, but rather we gather all the information that goes into constructing Kirk, and the only way to do this is to destroy him. We then transmit the information up to the ship and reassemble Kirk from entirely new atoms and subatomic particles following exactly the same pattern. Is this still Kirk? First of all, let's acknowledge that every up quark is fundamentally identical to every other up quark, and the same is true of every down quark, and so on. There's no way to distinguish one from another. So, assuming that the pattern is followed exactly, is this still Kirk, even though he's made up of entirely different matter? That's a toughie, I think. It depends whether we consider the identity of the person to reside in the matter of which they are constructed or in the form that that matter takes. If the form is what we consider to be important, then this is still Kirk. If we consider the actual material to be the key factor, then this is not Kirk, even though he might be identical in every perceptible way, including his personality and his memories. I think generally we probably identify the form as the person rather than the precise matter of which they are made. We know for certain, after all, that the matter changes all the time. Even if whole cells aren't replaced, the fundamental particles of which they are made are. So we're probably not what we're made of, but the form which that matter takes. Okay, but now let's suppose that we can gather all the information that goes into constructing Kirk, but this time we don't have to destroy him. We can then transmit this information somewhere and construct a new Kirk using this information. Is this new Kirk also really still Kirk? At the molecular and subatomic levels, there would be no way to differentiate them. Nor would there be any difference in their personalities or memories, at least during the very first instant. Then they would begin to diverge in this respect, go on and have new experiences, accumulate new memories. From then on, we might be able to say that one of these is the original Kirk and one is a copy. Now let's consider Theseus's ship again. Supposing that, over time, every part of that ship was replaced. According to our form notion of identity, it remains the same ship. But what if the original pieces, even in their damaged or decayed state, were retained, and when they were all available, we rebuilt the ship out of those parts, decrepit and decaying as it would be? Is this then now the real ship, the original ship? And is the other one then now just a copy? Now let's consider the resurrection of the body in some religious traditions. John Hick, an Anglican philosopher and theologian, back in the 1960s, I think it was, carried out some thought experiments very similar to those I've carried out here with reference to Captain Kirk, but this time it was with respect to the idea of some future bodily resurrection. The same issues of identity and continuity arise. Later in life, he considered a position put forward by another theologian by the name of John Polkinghorne. He states Polkinghorne's position as follows. He believes not only that Jesus rose from the dead in a bodily form, but also that we also will be resurrected in bodily form. He suggests that in some way the soul might have, in an extraordinary, elaborate sense, doors into the information-bearing patterns of the body, which, of course, dissolve at death. But God remembers it all, and God will re-embody it when I am resurrected. That will be the continuity between life in this world and life in the world to come. Or, as he has put it elsewhere, the body has a code or formula expressing its entire nature and structure, and this formula is re-embodied as a resurrection body in the resurrection world. It's interesting that Polkinghorne expressed a similar idea here to the one I discussed above, namely that the soul may contain information that's later used to reconstruct the body, some kind of template, if you like. So what is preserved, in fact, is information. Hick quickly points out, though, the obvious issue. Information from what point in the person's life? If the person died as a baby, would they then be resurrected as a baby? Presumably so. Even worse, if they died of some horrible disease, would they be resurrected in this exact same state? Maybe the resurrected baby just continues to grow. That seems okay, according to this theory. But what about the frail or ill person? Let's think again about our Kirks, our Captain Kirks. Let's suppose that every time Kirk is beamed up or down, the information about the current version of Kirk is retained, in the pattern buffer, as Trekkies would say. If we then lose our latest version of Kirk, we can simply make a new copy from one of the several patterns held in the buffer. Of course, any new Kirk we make from this won't retain the memories of any later Kirks. These Kirks are backups. Basically, it's like returning your computer to an earlier state before the problem arose. So maybe God keeps backup versions of everyone's pattern and makes a new you based on that pattern at the end of time. Not sure which one he will use. But is it really you? Setting aside the notions of matter transporters and gods, the question remains, who exactly are you? What makes you, you? And by what right do you claim to be the same person you were yesterday or 20 years ago? Or is just thinking you're that person enough?